Good afternoon. Let's get right down to business here, as we do every afternoon at 4 o'clock. Mottek On Money, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com, and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, KBC.com, Apple, iTunes, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms. Wild ride for stocks. Kicking off the new week, stocks moved sharply lower right after the opening bell, and the Dow plunged, around 665 points. That was the low point of the day, and then we saw the market fight its way higher and actually turn positive for a time briefly. All of this centered on the big announcement from President Trump announcing he would impose tariffs of 25% on Mexico and Canada and an additional 10% on China. But it looks like things changed, as they do quickly these days. President Trump said he would pause imposing new tariffs on Mexico for a month. And then came the news that the postponement will also impact Canadian imports for a 30-day period. He made that announcement in a social media post. Tariffs on Canadian, Mexican, and Chinese imports have been set to go into effect after midnight. Canada now joining Mexico in receiving a pause on those duties. Looks like the 10% tariff, though, will be imposed on China. Stocks ended lower, but well off the low point of the day. The Dow came in for a closing loss of 123 points, settling at 44,422. The S&P 500 gave back 46 at 5,995, and the NASDAQ down 235 points to settle at 19,392. Looks like the yield in the 10-year note has flattened a bit. Looks like the yield in the 10-year note now at 4.56%. President Trump's tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China, if all implemented, according to one estimate, could shave 1% from U.S. economic growth and add 1% to annualized price pressure numbers, according to one analyst, senior analyst at Interactive Brokers. President Trump has suggested he might soon move to impose tariffs on other allies, including the European Union, possibly the United Kingdom. We saw a wild ride in the crypto space in all of this today. Bitcoin plunged to as low as 91,442, and that also rebounded above 100,000. In fact, let's bring up the latest here. Looks like Bitcoin's above 101,000 now, 101,591 at last check. The impact of the president's threatened tariffs for consumers and businesses, the supply chain, and international trade all remains to be seen. I'll discuss that live later this hour with Mario Cordero, the CEO of the Port of Long Beach, which, along with the Port of Los Angeles, makes up the largest port complex in the United States and, of course, one of the largest in the world. Mario Cordero will be joining us live later this hour. As you heard at the top of the hour, Rick Caruso launched a nonprofit that aims to pressure the government to speed up the cleanup and recovery following the devastating firestorms we saw. He made the announcement actually about a week or so ago on this program here on Mottek On Money. If you want to review the podcast and my last conversation with Rick Caruso, bring up the January 24th podcast of Mottek On Money. Rick Caruso, of course, the business and civic leader here in Los Angeles, and making the official announcement today, recruiting business leaders to join the initiative. He's entitled Steadfast LA, which includes the Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos and his wife, philanthropist Nicole Avant, as well as Amazon's Mike Hopkins, head of Prime Video and Amazon MGM Studios. Big announcement today on the recovery here in Southern California. And it was the music industry's biggest night last night at the Grammy Awards in downtown Los Angeles, as the massive recovery effort continues following the deadly and devastating wildfires in Pacific Palisades, Altadena, Pasadena, and the other areas hit by the fires over the past month. The annual Grammy Awards ceremony began with a tribute to Los Angeles and a salute to first responders, and concluded with an LA County fire captain presenting the big award of the night, the final award of the night on stage. And that fire captain is LA County Fire Captain SHIELA KELLIHER, and she will be joining us live later this hour as we salute firefighters and all first responders here in Southern California. Captain SHIELA KELLIHER will be joining us live. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works now. And quite a day here. Top-ranked money manager Ken Winans live with us here, President and Chief Investment Officer at Winans Investments, which you can find at winansinvestments.com. Ken Winans, also a market historian, author of numerous books, including Investment Atlas 3, Creating Wealth Using Historical Trends. That's his latest book. He's also a Forbes magazine contributor, so be sure to check out his latest articles. And Ken Winans also has his crypto credentials, too. It sounds like we got the right guy on the line here. Most importantly, he's host of Winning with Winans, heard every Monday night at 6 p.m. on your favorite station, 790 KBC. Ken Winans, good afternoon to you, sir.
Hello, Frank. And yes, you are 100% right. What a way to start off February with this wacky day. But Frank, let me jump in real quick because you know I'm a big believer in seasonality. February is typically, even in bull market years, is not a great month. I mean, it does okay, but it usually it's I guess we should say a hangover after January's using wonderful runs. And so we have to remember that. And then number two, we have a lot of earnings coming out. I mean, Microsoft's going to post numbers tomorrow. So you have what's going on in Washington. You have what's going on with companies. There's also word from the Treasury Department about what the U.S. borrowing needs are going to be. We have news coming out of each and every state, what their borrowing needs are. So there is just a cross current of information flowing. But I guess what catches me the most today, when we have days that are this volatile, I use them as a good measurement gauge for what people are stepping in and buying. And what caught my eye today, the one group that went up when everything else was down, utilities. Who would guess utilities would be the lead group today? But I think it's, again, Frank, we're having a grand reshuffling of the deck called the stock market, and the cards are going to be coming up different as we go through 2025 versus what they were last year.
On there live with money manager Ken Winans. Ken, the tariff story played out rather interestingly today. The rapid-fire announcements from the White House and indeed around the world impacting things nowadays. And today we had that big sell-off right out of the gate, more than 600 points lower for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Briefly moved into positive territory as we saw the pauses announced in those tariff plans for Canada and Mexico, and then a closing loss of 123 points for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The volatility index also spiked right out of the gate today and was up about 13%. What is your reaction to this trading action today, the spike in volatility, and might this be a precursor of days ahead?
Well, as bull markets age, they naturally get more volatile. And as I just mentioned, there is going to be, in my opinion, not if, but there is going to be a change in leadership. And to answer your question, I would just look at the various indices and what happened today. And I find it interesting that the Dow Industrial Average had less of a hit, even though there's more companies in it as a percentage that are affected by a tariff versus the NASDAQ. And it's interesting that when you look at just the straight NASDAQ composite, it's actually at a goose egg for 2025, yet the Dow Industrial Average is up 4. I think, again, that we talk about the grand reshuffling of people's portfolios, that people who are too heavy in NASDAQ-type stocks are going to want to consider reallocating their portfolio. But the tariffs are going to hit different industries at different times. You know, it's interesting because I now live in Las Vegas, and there's a lot of people who live in colder parts of the country who stay here or certainly down in places like Phoenix or even in the Palm Springs area. And I did run into somebody today who happens to be a Canadian, and they knew that I was a money manager. And we just briefly talked about this, and they didn't really understand the tariff situation. And I just pointed out, do you know that your country puts tariffs on our products? And he honestly didn't know that. So I think, again, various countries have to understand that it takes two to tango, and that we're just trying to reposition trade in the United States. But Frank, it's going to be a volatile process as we go through doing this.
All right. You also have your crypto credentials. So turning to that for a moment, Bitcoin got down to around 91K. Right now it's back to 101 or so. What are your thoughts about what happened in the crypto space in the face of all this action today?
Well, let me start with the real ugly, which is Ethereum. I mean, that is just brutal. It is down 25% from where it started the year. Now, there's a lot of news about what's going on there. But Frank, what I honestly see happening in the crypto space for now, you have to back into and say, look, we can deny it all we want, but crypto is still tied to what happens in the NASDAQ. And as I just mentioned, if the NASDAQ continues to be, volatile and lagging, I think it's safe to say that I think crypto itself, generally speaking, could be what we call range bound. And it would not surprise me for the foreseeable future that Bitcoin will trade in a range between 11K or 110K and 90K, and Ethereum will trade between 4 and 2,500. 4,000 and 2,500. I think, and of course, and throwing on top of that, the dollar is very strong. The dollar is on a tear right now. So again, anybody who enters crypto, I still believe in it in the long term. I believe the government's going to have a much stronger backing in it. And we are kind of in that no man's land with crypto where we're waiting for, further deregulation, further clarity that firms can jump in with. But I think, especially with what happened in Ethereum, should be a canary in the coal mine to anybody that this is a very volatile asset class and you need to be careful. Other quick point. Let's switch real quick. Let's talk about physical gold. It is on a tear. It's going to be one of my buy recommendations. I really do think people, if you don't have, even if you're not a gold bug, some people do it because they think the world's coming to an end. But I think as everyday investors, this is an asset group that outperformed the S&P 500 last year, and it's ahead of the S&P this year. I think as long as we have inflation, you've got to have metals in your portfolio. It seems to make the most sense. But Frank, it's still early in the year. Let's finish up earnings season, and then we'll see what the lead groups are going into March and into the rest of the year.
Yep. Price of gold hovering at or near all-time highs. It should be noted right now, let me bring it up here. It looks like gold's hovering around 2,847 and change. Silver, by the way, which has also been moving up lately, hovering above $32 an ounce. We're on the air live with money manager Ken Winans on what was a very volatile day for the stock market with the president's tariff proposals sending the market into gyrations today. Ultimately, the tariffs that were imposed on Canada and Mexico have been delayed for about 30 days after assurances by the Canadians and the Mexicans that the border regions will be beefed up as far as security is concerned. It's hard to believe it was just a week ago the DeepSeek story came up, which rattled the tech sector, including NVIDIA. NVIDIA taking another hit today, Ken, by the way, down to 116 and change here. What about the fallout from that story, which just happened a week ago?
I think the tech situation is that, I think it's reprogramming the way people see things. And again, NVIDIA's had just an amazing run. It is, there are times when people take profits, and I have to believe that there is going to be profit taking in the tech sector. I'm looking at Apple's down 9 year to date, NVIDIA's down 14. I'm looking at things like Microsoft down 3. So again, the Magnificent Seven are not quite that magnificent right now. It doesn't mean they're not good long-term investments, but you can't expect it to be a cash machine and go up all the time. I just think you have to finish earnings season before you try to catch some of these things because the valuations are stretched. They are priced for perfection. But Frank, I can turn around, and this is what's pretty amazing when you, in my line of work, to see what's working, what's not working, really in the first 5 weeks of the year. And you're looking at some of the, even in spite of all the talk of the tariffs and the threats, there are still an awful lot of industrial stocks that are on a tear right now. And I think, again, you have to conclude that the companies, the management of these companies, they're already looking ahead. They're already hedging their raw material costs. They're doing what they have to do. So you're looking to buy stocks that have talented management that can know how to navigate these situations. Last but not least, energy. When I look at today, a lot of the energy stocks that I track had a really good day. So in spite of the fact that crude might not be doing as great as we would expect it, or the natural gas, especially with the warming trends happening, might have issues, but it's very clear that people are buying energy stocks.
On there live with money manager Ken Winans, and that's WINANSinvestments.com, by the way. Let me ask you this, Ken. Speaking of raw materials, we have a massive recovery effort underway here in Southern California following the horrific firestorms. We heard today from Rick Caruso, who's launching officially now a nonprofit that's looking to pressure the government to speed up the cleanup and recovery following those devastating fires in the Palisades, Altadena, and Pasadena and other areas. What is this going to look like with all that material that's going to be needed, lumber and other raw materials needed for this massive rebuilding from an economic standpoint? What do you see ahead?
Well, it's funny you talk about lumber because I do track Boise Cascade, and its symbol is BCC. So if you're looking for a play there, that might be one to take a good look at. And in fact, I'll throw it on my list. It's up 5% on the year, and it actually is a dividend. But You're talking about the kind of rebuilding we're talking about. You're talking about concrete, lumber. You're talking about everything from copper, ceramic tiles. And it is, the only thing I would encourage folks is you're going to have to be a bit patient, because getting those raw materials in place, forgetting all the other parts that have to go into rebuilding, but it is going to be a stretch. But I am hearing people, especially people in the state of Washington and people in Oregon, saying, hey, look, why isn't California recreate its own logging industry? Why is it raiding our forest? It should be raiding its own. So I think there's going to have to be some soul searching in Sacramento between their concerns about the environment and just the raw need for some quality lumber to be willing to allow, certainly lumber companies to go in there and cut down some trees. I think we're going to have to look at that seriously. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. But Frank, it's going to take a long time. I'm speechless on what happened, as you and I have brought up so many times on air. It's just hard to tell people. They're going to have to just be patient. They really are, and work through the process.
Another big story, Elon Musk getting to work in Washington, trimming government spending, and this DOGE organization, that's the acronym for Department of Government Efficiency, digging pretty deep there. Ken Winans, what's your reaction to the latest news on DOGE and the shutting down of various departments and so on and so forth?
I think that we can imagine in Washington, because I think many of the audience might know, I go back every year with the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce, and I've been in Washington, and I see what happens back there. And all I can tell you is I really think there is a bureaucratic civil war going on right now with, the deep entrenched folks fighting back. I mean, all this talk about trying to vilify DOGE. It's going to be a fight back there to get this done. I commend the folks who are part of DOGE, because they are really sticking their head out of the foxhole to fight this fight. But it's not going to be clean or efficient. I get a lot of the email traffic from various parts of, congressional districts throughout California and Nevada. And very clearly with the Democratic districts, I saw, the kind of scare tactics you often hear with bond issues. If you don't go for this, that you're going to suffer for it. And I just think, again, a lot of it's scare tactic to try to get the electorate to put pressure on Washington to not go through with things like freezing grants and freezing spending. And there are going to be convulsions in this process, but Frank, it will take time to have all this clean itself out. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to remember one very important thing. We are trillions and trillions of dollars in the hole. We spend more than we take in, and it's not that we're undertaxed, we're overtaxed. It's a spending problem, not a collections problem. And again, it's going to take time to correct this, as it would be any large organization. It takes time to get your house in order.
All right. What about Tesla stock? Also taking a hit today, by the way, down about $21 back to $383. There were some write-ups. Hey, it's an American company. Why is the tariff story impacting it? But, of course, it's had a big run-up. But what are your thoughts here on Tesla now?
Well, it's interesting. There were a couple of articles, and I question who actually wrote them, but I'll just bring it up just as a case of somewhat entertainment, saying that there were Californians that were protesting buying Teslas, and some of Tesla's most popular models suddenly are not being bought as much in California. I honestly think it's more of a cost issue. I think that there's general honest cost pressure on EVs. Now that we've changed the rules to the game and a lot of those tax incentives aren't in place, they're now having to compete on a fair playing field, and those things are going to have to go through. I just think, as I look at a lot of EVs, and I look at certainly with what's going on, I look around Las Vegas at what people are driving, and you're seeing a lot of new models of conventional cars, but I don't see a lot of new models in the EV space. So I think, again, you might have to think about making some of those important design changes that automotive companies have traditionally had to do to spruce up things. But Frank, I think it's less of a, we don't like Elon Musk. I think it's just more of a plain old-fashioned cost issue as we go through still incredibly tight times for a lot of people.
All right, and last but not least, anything that's on your radar screen as far as this earnings parade that continues, and any other specific places where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, I'll tell you what, I do think that this to answer your question, anything that misses earnings, anything that gives me bad news, I don't care what it is, it's out of my portfolios. When you're later in a bull market, you've got to be that draconian on your choices. But you know what? I'm really taking a good look, even though I'm traditionally not a utility guy. I mentioned earlier in the show, I just
Yep.
think that some of these natural gas utility companies should be taken a look at. So several names that I'll throw out there: Atmos Energy, symbol ATO; MeSource, symbol NI; and UGI Corp, symbol UGI. And then on the ETF space, just as part of that, take a look at, let me see here, that symbol sometimes escapes me here, XLU. It is the utility ETF. It's also up about 4% on the year. So again, the tortoise can win this year over the hare, and I'm talking about tortoises like these kind of stodgy companies. But I think, again, you want to rebalance. That's the word of the day from me.
Ken, thank you very much for taking the call on this big day today. We appreciate it as always. Always great to speak with you, and look forward to hearing you again tonight on Winning with Winans, which you can hear every Monday night at 6 p.m. right here on 790 KABC. That is Ken Winans, top-ranked money manager, president, and chief investment officer at Winans Investments, which you can find at winansinvestments.com. Ken, thank you very much for coming to the line this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Righto, thank you very much. And out to the freeways we go now, 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues, 790 KBC. Good afternoon. Stocks ending the day lower, but well off the lows of the day. The Dow was down more than 600 points early on. Came in for a closing loss of 123 points. Actually turned positive for a while during the trading day, where he settled at 44,422. The S&P 500 down 46 at 59.95. NASDAQ down 235 at 19,392. Wild ride for cryptos today with Bitcoin getting down to around 91,000 overnight. Had recovered, though, during the day and is back above 101,000. Ethereum took a big hit today, right now hovering at around 2,872. And Doge also lower right now at 28 cents. NVIDIA pulling back more than $3 to 116 and change. Tesla down nearly 21 at 383 and change. We saw Apple down about $8 at 228.01. Gold moving higher right now at 2,847.20, still hovering near its all-time high, which was hit last week. And now the latest news here in 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Good afternoon. Wild ride for the financial markets today, with the Dow plunging more than 600 points early on, briefly turning positive, coming in for a closing loss today of 123 points, back to 44,422. The S&P 500 gave back 46, and the NASDAQ down 235. All the major averages closing well above their lows of the day. President Trump suspending his threat to steep tariffs on Mexico and Canada today, agreeing to a 30-day pause in return for concessions on border and crime enforcement with the two neighboring countries. Tariffs on China, though, still to take effect tonight. Both Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau and the Mexican President Sheinbaum said they'd agree to bolster border enforcement efforts in response to President Trump's demand to crack down on immigration and drug smuggling. According to Reuters, Canada's agreed to deploy new technology and personnel along its border with the U.S. and launch cooperative efforts to fight organized crime, fentanyl smuggling, and money laundering. Mexico agreeing to reinforce its northern border with 10,000 troops to stem the flow of illegal migration and drugs. The agreement's forestalling for now the onset of a trade war that economists predicted would damage the economies of all involved and usher in higher prices for consumers. After speaking by phone with both leaders, President Trump said he would try to negotiate economic deals over the coming months with the two largest trading partners, Canada and Mexico, whose economies have become tightly intertwined with the U.S. since the landmark free trade deal was struck back in the 1990s and updated under the first Trump administration. Looks like no deals emerged for China tonight, which still faces across-the-board tariffs of 10% that are poised to begin at 9:01 our time here in Los Angeles tonight. A White House spokesman says the president would not be speaking with the Chinese leader until sometime later in the week. The impact of the president's threatened tariffs for consumers, businesses, the supply chain, and international trade remains to be seen. All of this being followed very closely here in Southern California. And joining us live now is Mario Cordero, the CEO of the Port of Long Beach, which, along with the Port of Los Angeles, makes up the largest port complex in the United States. Mario Cordero, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Frank, and thank you for the invitation.
Wonderful to have you with us again. Give us your reaction to all this big news today, first of all.
Well, from the port perspective, it's good news. And by that I mean the tariffs that are contemplated against Canada and Mexico are on hold, which hopefully tells us that the tariff issue is more being used as a negotiation tool to address some legitimate issues that the administration believes it needs to address. So from that perspective, we're on standby. And, you know, this industry has always been in what we call an environment of uncertainty. But on the other hand, again, hopefully, this issue will be resolved. Now, having said that, here in Southern California, we're not too much impacted by the Mexico or Canada trade because that's a lower percentage of our containerized trade that comes into the country, that comes into the state here in Southern California.
Yep. Right, and as you've informed us well over the years, the Port of Long Beach primarily has cargo coming in from Asia, right, and mostly China. What about this additional 10% tariff on China? Of course, there had been tariffs imposed already during the first Trump administration and continued in the Biden administration, right? So tell us what we need to know about that.
Well, that's correct. The tariffs continued under the Biden administration, so we have already been in a tariff environment. So suffice to say that if the tariff increases another 10%, then again, there's pause for concern. But, hopefully, again, the president will be having these conversations with President Xi later in the week, and hopefully some developments occur there that forecloses tariff implementation.
All right, you got some of the biggest cargo ships in the world coming in there. I remember the christening of the USS Benjamin Franklin, for example, and give us an update on business there at the port with all these big ships coming in.
Well, business is good, Frank. At the end of the year, for calendar year 2024, the Port of Long Beach had its highest containerized cargo movement on record, and I'm referencing 9.6 million containers. That's a record number in our 113-year history. So from that perspective, obviously, again, we are beneficiaries of a good economy. And again, the consumer is resilient, and the consumer spending far above for the holiday spending of November, December exceeded what experts had predicted to a tune of overall November, December year-to-year growth of 4%.
So looking at record business there?
Absolutely. Record business for the year and record business fourth quarter 2024.
That's very exciting. And we're on the air live with Mario Cordero, who's the CEO of the Port of Long Beach. And we're watching what's happening very, very closely. The supply chain issues, of course. You were, of course, in charge there during the COVID days and went through that entire era. How is the supply chain looking these days?
Well, the supply chain is much more fluid, so I think the worst scenarios are behind us, and I'm talking about the 2020, 2021 COVID-19 impact to the supply chain. That was unprecedented. So again, lessons learned. So we were able to move 9.6 million containerized cargo for 2024 without congestion or bottlenecks. So I think from that perspective, we're in fine shape.
All right, and let me ask you this. I know you were honored recently by the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation at the Eddie Awards. Tell us about that, and a lot of competition out there. You're obviously one of the biggest economic engines here in the Los Angeles area, recognized by the LAEDC. Tell us what sets you guys apart.
Well, like I said, you've mentioned it there, Frank. We are an economic engine. International trade is a big factor as to why California is the fifth largest economy in the world. So despite the geopolitical discussions and changes in administration, we do know that one thing history teaches us, ports are very important to the economic dynamic here. So this has been the case with the Port of Long Beach when we have 2.6 million jobs directly or indirectly throughout the nation from the Port of Long Beach, and at a local level in the region, in excess of 550,000 jobs that emanate from work here in the supply chain at the Port of Long Beach.
Of course, a massive recovery effort is underway now following the wildfires here in Southern California, the heartbreaking devastation, and now probably the biggest rebuilding effort certainly we've seen ever here in the Los Angeles area. Do you expect raw materials to be brought in through the ports here? And tell us how things might be impacted there.
Well, certainly we're experiencing a tragic scenario here in the greater Los Angeles area in terms of what happened in North County. So we do expect materials, durable goods to be coming into the complex. As you know, in a rebuilding process, it's really going to take all aspects of commodities and materials to move forward with what's going to be a quite a rebuilding period. So again, from a port perspective, we're going to do everything to work with both the city and the county of Los Angeles. And, of course, we're a department of the city, so together with the leadership here, Mayor Richardson here as mayor of Long Beach, we have contributed to the fund for this recovery. So, again, it's a tragic scenario, but on the other hand, LA strong.
And you recently delivered the State of the Port speech and turned a lot of concern about the environmental impact of the fires and so forth. But certainly the port has done its part to help the environment over the years. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, the three numbers I told the audience that we have to remember are the numbers as follows. 92, 71, 98. 92 represents a 92 reduction in diesel soot or diesel soot, PM, particulate matter, 71% in NOx, and 98% in SOx, sulfur oxides. This is from a baseline year of 2005. So with all the commentary of harmful emissions from the port, I will say that both the Port of Long Beach and overall the San Pedro Bay Complex and the Port of Los Angeles, we have done a terrific job in moving forward with reducing emissions. And as you may know, our current quest is to move forward to zero emission operations. It will take a while, that goes like for 2030 and beyond, and to have a complete transition of Dreas trucks to zero emission, be it electric or hydrogen fuel. So it is a story at the international level that there's no other leadership that has done this remarkable success in reducing harmful emissions as we have here in Southern California. So it's a true narrative that we need to tell. And again, we're very honored by the recognition in terms of those who have recognized that leadership of our Green Port initiatives here at the Port of Long Beach. And at the same time, growing commercial business, which is the main mission or mandate for us. Like I said, we had a record year in 2024. So we've been able to grow our business and also at the same time address a significant reduction of harmful emissions from port operations.
Mario Cordero, the CEO of the Port of Long Beach, will let you get back to your important work there, sir. Thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Well, thank you.
We wish you all the best, and again, congratulations on your recent honors there, and a big job there as one of the economic engines here in Southern California, the Port of Long Beach. And let's get right out to the freeways now on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues on 790 KBC. Good afternoon. It was the music industry's biggest night last night at the Grammy Awards in downtown Los Angeles as the massive recovery effort continues following the deadly and devastating wildfires in Pacific Palisades, Altadena, Pasadena, Castaic, Sylmar, all the other areas hit by fires over the past month. The annual Grammy Awards began with a tribute to Los Angeles and a salute to first responders and concluded with an LA County Fire Captain presenting the big award of the night. On stage, that Fire Captain is LA County Fire Captain SHIELA, who joins us live now this afternoon. Captain, thank you very much for taking the call here today.
Hey, how are you?
Fantastic. Everybody was thrilled for you, and of course, we salute you and all of your colleagues at the LA County Fire Department, all the firefighters here in Los Angeles. And you had that big moment on stage there with Beyonce. Tell us about last night.
Man, it was really an incredible night, and it was amazing how the Grammys pivoted to really make it about giving to the communities that were so affected by that. And I think that just put this beautiful light over the whole ceremony, and everybody was just proud to be a part of it. And I know I was the lucky one that got to open that envelope and present the award, but I stood there in representation of all the first responders that were out on the lines for, weeks on end from all over California as well as the western states.
Everyone thrilled for you and all the firefighters, and you're on the front page of international newspapers today. Tell us, you seem to be really moved by that moment and seem to be thrilled for the winner there last night.
Yeah, I was, because it was overwhelming standing there as the curtains went up. Because remember, I always say this: it's like we don't choose to do what we do; it's more of a calling. And I've been doing it 25 years, and I've been in the field the majority of my career, working at heavy hot stations. And most of the work we do is, in the dark where no one sees us, and it's not pleasant a lot of times. But we don't do it for the awards or the accolades or the applause. And to get hit with that when that curtain went up, and to really feel that, because people appreciate what we do. I mean, we definitely know that, but boy, it came at once, and you just felt really honored to be there and to receive that. And like I said, not just for me, but for everybody that we represented.
That's so wonderful. And the chief was on stage with you too at that moment.
Yeah, Chief Maroney was there. He did a great job. The whole crew had just listen. The talent there was world known, and they were very gracious to us, and they were very supportive, and they all stopped and talked and took pictures. So that made it very special for us. And I think it was neat that I was able to present that award to Beyonce because it had been so long in coming. I don't know, it was just super special. And I'm a Texas girl, so I felt really good about honoring her coloring outside the lines of what she normally does. And she is a Texas girl, and that kind of represents a big part of where she grew up. So good to her.
That is fantastic and was also wonderful. It was a fundraiser last night for the recovery efforts. For anyone that missed it last night for whatever reason, what is your message to the folks out there, the business people especially, who are listening here to support the recovery efforts and especially your efforts?
I think that the Grammys did a great job in highlighting some of the small businesses that were affected and really highlighting them. So if you have to do business in any of those areas, it's like really pick out those, family businesses that are struggling. I think this is going to be a marathon for sure in the recovery process, from the smallest things to the greatest things, and that we can't get fatigued and to pace ourselves and to keep showing up in the way that you can, that brings you joy and makes, it makes sense for you. But it's going to take a while. So, and just on a current note, we have rains coming this weekend. So we all need to, put those caution hats back on and pay attention to what the local channels and authorities are telling us about those mud flows and the conditions in the canyons and the burn scar areas.
Absolutely. And we will, of course, always keep a line open to you. Again, thank you, and God bless you for your service and for that wonderful moment last night. And we wish you and everybody there all the best. And we'll of course, be watching what's happening here in the coming days with the rain in the forecast. Captain, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you. And thanks for the continued support. We all feel it, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
All of us are with you. All of us are with you. That is Captain Sheila Kelleher, LA County Fire Captain, live with us here on Mottek On Money, 790 KABC.